All right, so picture this, a whole decade of nonstop parties, a booming economy, and this widespread belief that literally anyone could get rich and get rich fast. Then, in just 1 week, the whole thing comes crashing down. Today, we're going to unpack the Great Crash of 1929, what caused it, how it all went down, and why it's still a super important lesson for us today. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the good times, the roaring 20s. Then we'll look at how the stock market turned into this national obsession and the risky way people were paying for it. We'll watch the crash happen in real time. And finally, we'll see how it created this devastating domino effect across the entire country. Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1920. World War I is finally over and America is just ready to let loose. This decade, the Roaring 20s, was a party like the country had never seen before. I want you to just try and imagine it. You've got jazz music spilling out of clubs, brand new cars zipping down the streets, and this feeling that anything is possible. It was a huge shift, too. For the first time ever, more Americans were living in cities than on farms. The vibe was just total optimism. This is basically when our modern consumer culture was born. New inventions and mass production made things like cars and radios, which used to be total luxuries, suddenly affordable for regular families. And with ads popping up everywhere, it felt like you had to have all this new stuff. And here's a really, really key idea. For the first time, it became totally normal to buy now, pay later. We call it consumer credit. It was super exciting, but it also got people used to the idea of living in the moment and not really worrying about the future consequences. Now, that whole buy now, pay later mindset didn't just stop with cars and radios. Oh no, it spread to the one place it could do the most damage, Wall Street. So how did regular people even get into playing the stock market? Well, it actually started during World War I. The government sold something called Liberty Bonds to help pay for the war, and millions of ordinary Americans bought them. It was their first taste of investing, and a lot of them liked it. The big bankers on Wall Street saw this and had a light bulb moment. They realized they could market stocks to the general public, just like you'd sell soap or cereal. And it worked. Pretty soon, everyone was talking about stocks. It was a national obsession. Seriously, the stock market became the new national pastime. It was like following your favorite sports team or influencer today. People would read newspapers to see what stocks movie stars like Charlie Chaplin were buying. Financiers like Joseph P. Kennedy became total superstars. Okay, so everyone's obsessed with stocks, but how were all these regular folks affording it? The answer is simple, but it's also the absolute key to understanding why the crash was so bad. They were using borrowed money. There was a special name for this, buying on margin. Basically, it was like getting a loan specifically to buy stocks. You could put down a little bit of your own money, and your stockbroker would lend you the rest. It meant you could buy way more stock than you could actually afford. And I'm not kidding when I say a little bit of your own money. By the late 1920s, it got so crazy that you only had to put 10% down. That means as much as 90% of a stock's price was being bought with borrowed money. Just let that sink in. To people like Alice Austin, who was a photographer worried about her savings, this sounded like a can't-miss opportunity. Her broker pretty much told her, this is your ticket to getting rich quick, and we'll even lend you the money to do it. It seemed too good to be true. So you might be thinking, where was the government in all this? Weren't there any rules? Nope. The government's attitude was completely hands-off. It's a philosophy called laissez-faire, which basically means let it be. President Coolidge and others believed the market would just take care of itself. Okay, so let's recap. We've got a market built on a mountain of borrowed money, a public that's convinced stocks only go up, and a government that's looking the other way. The stage was absolutely set for disaster. And when the end came, it came fast. It all went down in less than a week. It started with a scary drop late on a Wednesday. The next day, Black Thursday, the panic selling began. And after a very tense weekend, the bottom just fell out. Black Monday and Black Tuesday were a total collapse. This quote really captures the pure, raw shock of the moment. You have to understand, people who were millionaires on paper just a few days earlier were watching their entire fortunes just evaporate in minutes. The American dream had turned into an absolute nightmare. There was this one last-ditch effort to stop the bleeding. Wall Street's most powerful bankers actually pulled their money, $250 million, to try and prop the market up. but it was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water gun. The panic was just too powerful. Now, this is crucial. This wasn't just a problem for rich investors. The crash started a chain reaction, a domino effect, that would end up bringing the entire American economy to its knees. And this shows that domino effect perfectly. The market crashes, people get scared, and they don't just lose trust in stocks, they lose trust in the banks. So everyone runs to the bank to pull out their cash. The problem is, banks don't keep all that money in the vault, they lend it out. So thousands of banks failed, and millions of people who had never owned a single stock lost every penny they had. This was the beginning of the Great Depression, a full decade of unbelievable hardship. With the banks gone and businesses failing, millions of people lost their jobs. Families who lost their homes were forced to live in shanty towns they bitterly nicknamed Hoovervilles, after the president they blamed for their situation. So, to wrap it all up, the Great Crash wasn't caused by just one thing. It was a perfect storm. You had this culture of wild optimism and easy credit. You had regular people gambling with borrowed money, and you had a government that just let it all happen. When that bubble burst, it triggered the worst economic disaster in American history. All right, let's do a quick check to make sure you've got the main ideas down. First question, in your own words, what was buying on margin and what made it such a dangerous game to play? And for the last one, explain how the stock market crashing in New York City could lead to a family in some small town who never owned a single stock losing their life savings. Think about that chain reaction, that domino effect we talked about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.